Moving on to M part 1, let's take a look at our 10 words for the day before we get started. And like always, let's go ahead and say these out together so we know the correct pronunciation. First word is the word meander, meek, mellow, menagerie, methodical, metropolitan, mimic, mingle, minute, and mobile or mobile. Okay, either one works. You get to pick. I would just say stick with it and be consistent. Now the first word we're going to be looking at is the word meander. Now this is a verb to follow a winding or intricate course, to wander aimlessly and without urgency. So synonyms here might be the word zigzag, twist, snake, stroll, amble, wander, mosey, straggle, ramble, gallivant, and traipse. So we have a lot of synonyms here where we have the word meander too. Now to meander is to go on a walk or to just travel along, not very fast, not very slow, just kind of look around, take your time, but also not in a very straightforward manner. You're not walking in a straight line, your guys are going topsy-turvy, curving around, going on cliffs, coming back down, you're taking your time and it's not a straight line. You're kind of squiggling along. This is the reason why we might use the word zigzag to describe the word meander, and we might also say the word mosey or straggle. Wander's really good. Stroll has that slowness to it, and we can also say the word snake because it goes back and forth. So when we're talking about meandering, we don't really have an end goal in mind. We're just kind of enjoying our time, not spending too much time on one place or the other, constantly moving, but without a goal in mind, and so we're not moving that fast. So once more, that's how we see the word meander. Those are the synonyms, and this is the sentence. However, cruise bikes are designed for those who wish to meander. There's a lot of bikes in the world, right, you guys? And so if you guys are interested in competitive biking, you want to bike across a country, then you might want to use a bike that is built for durability and very strong, has a lot of gears, and so you can go up and down mountains. Some people want to go really, really fast, and they only go on flat land, and so they might get a very fast or speeding bike. However, those who want to meander, those who want to just look around, take in the sights, not go that fast, and just enjoy it without having a significant end goal in mind, they might choose to buy cruise bikes, which will allow them to meander instead. Okay, again, taking that time, not really focusing on anything, that is meandering. Create a maze for children to meander through by raking the leaves into paths. So create a maze. This is going back and forth, side to side. You're taking your time. There's not really an end goal in sight. You want them to maybe, spend some time doing something that has a lot of energy that might be into it. So you might want to have something that they can meander through, something they can go through, taking their time and weaving back and forth. Past Burton, the river continues to meander northeastwards. So when we think about a river here, we never see a river that's completely straight, right? We always see it cutting through valleys. It goes in a very snake-like pattern. Making sense, it's going northeastwards. The river will continue to slowly make its way up that direction. Long, narrow hallways, she likes to wind and meander. So it says wind, but it means wind. Wind also means to go back and forth like this. And so Chi likes to wind and meander, take their time, look around, not really have an end goal in mind, and they're really doing this just because they're kind of aimless, not going fast, not going slow. It's a style and it's a speed of walking too. And oftentimes this is like a very specific verb that is so specific, in fact, that people don't tend to use it quite often. But when they use it correctly, you can instantly know exactly what the action or the motion is. And so we are starting off here. The next one is the word meek. This is an adjective deficient in spirit and courage, not violent or strong. So we have two different definitions here, deficient in spirit and courage, and also not very violent or strong. So when we're thinking about spirit and courage, maybe they can't stand up for themselves, maybe they're quite passive, maybe if somebody gets their drink order wrong, they're not going to go up to them and say, hey, can you please fix my drink order? They'll just sit there and drink the wrong drink. At the same time, they're not violent or strong, so they don't have the strength, they don't have the physical strength to show that they are powerful. They also are not violent, meaning they're probably pacifists, meaning they probably can be characterized as cowardly, or simply they just don't like fighting. So you can take it any of these kinds of ways. They do not stand out, people who are meek, or meekness as a quality. Synonyms are unpretentious, demure, humble, modest, lowly, unassuming, and passive. Some of these are more positive or neutral than others. Some of them are quite negative. I would say unpretentious isn't that bad in terms of positive or negative. It's pretty much in the middle there. Demure, I would say humble and modest, those three are probably more positive. So they are very quiet, they keep to themselves, maybe not so violent for sure, not so strong for sure. I would maybe say questioning the in spirit and courage aspect to these three, and so these synonyms maybe in those areas touch and go. Then we have lowly, which is quite negative. I would say this is one of the more negative ones. Unassuming, neutral to negative, and then we have passive, and I think passive is quite good in terms of a synonym for the word meek. But once more, meek is just being very weak or powerless and choosing not to do anything, oftentimes choosing to stay passive or not fighting. For his sole reply, Daniel gave him a shy, childlike, meek, and amiable smile. So we've learned what amiable is. We have a shy and childlike and meek and amiable smile. It's probably very small, he's very passive, and so he's not really saying anything. It's only a smile that he can see. And so Meek here, doesn't have a lot of violence at all. In fact, there's no violence. There's not a lot of power there. There's not a lot of courage. It's quite shy, in the corner. And that's how we can imagine this idea of meekness. Indeed, I felt quite meek compared to the reaction of the audience. The reaction this person expected was going to be stronger, more powerful, but it wasn't that. And so the person on stage is thinking, I don't feel the power, I don't feel courageous, I don't feel spirit, and I don't feel like being super active, and now I feel very meek, like I feel very small. Even meek cats sometimes lose control when faced with a new feline in the home. So oftentimes we will use the word meek to describe some kind of animal. An animal that is shy, an animal that doesn't want to interact with others. We do tend to see it in those kinds of contexts as well. And so when we're talking about a meek cat, maybe this cat is very passive, maybe it's very shy. It likes to sit in the corner, make itself small, is very nice to the owner, but sometimes if there's another cat, they really don't like it, and so they'll get violent or ferocious, and they will show that they're very courageous and scratch them or try to fight with them. Some players are bold and firm, and others are meek and gentle. And so we have these antonyms coming along here: bold and firm, powerful. There's a lot of strength here. There's a lot of energy and activity, versus meek and gentle, weak, passive, very kind, very forgiving. And so that's how we can see the differences. I would say that if we're using the word meek in any kind of situation, more often than not, it will read as negative, because being meek is very different than being passive. Meek also means that there's a certain type of weakness in terms of character. So for that reason, when you're using the word meek, keep that in mind. It also uses the word in a very negative context sometimes, and also denotes that there is little to no power. So if you want that kind of definition to come through, that's when I would use it the most. The next word is mellow. This is an adjective. In terms of sound, taste, or color, it means pleasantly smooth or gentle by age or experience. I put that in parentheses here because the word mellow oftentimes goes to describe things that relate to one of the senses, okay? So touch, taste, sound, hear, etc., etc. And so sound, taste, or color, particularly, I would say, are described as being mellow if they are very gentle, soft, not abrasive at all, very pleasant colors, sounds, or tastes. Additionally, we might say mellow, gentle by age or experience. This is something that comes with time, maturity. That's why the synonyms are mellifluent, dulcet, euphonious, conditioned, seasoned, mature, and amicable. I would say that the first three are very specifically about the sound aspect of mellowness. So if something's very pleasant to hear, not very active, not very energetic, it's easy listening, then we might say that it's mellifluent or dulcet, or euphonious, very pleasant to listen to. Additionally, we have conditioned and seasoned and mature. I would say this is that aspect of gentleness or pleasantness by age, maturity. And then we have amicable, meaning very pleasantly smooth in general. I would say that these synonyms, while they're all good, the word mellow, because it has so many different definitions tied up with it, you want to be more specific. So if you're talking specifically about sound, then use those three. If not, you go ahead and use any of the other four, depending on how the situation calls for it. So that's why I can't really say that any one is better than the other, because it really does depend on the context when you use these. He is, as most very old people, a slightly mellow type. So very old people tend to be quite gentle by the time they're very old. They don't yell. They don't go do, marathons every single weekend. They're very gentle, they're very pleasant, they're quite nice, they're soft-spoken, and so they can be described as either very mature, seasoned, or conditioned, or mellow is another way to put it. I'm just trying to get you mellow enough to tell me why you're so upset today. So here, this person maybe isn't that gentle. Maybe this person isn't that nice or generous or, pleasant right now. Maybe they're really upset. Again, angry. And so I'm just trying to get you mellow enough, calm you down enough, so you can have a conversation with me without you yelling at any point. The flavor is mellow and it has a spicy aroma. Maybe this is about ice cream. Who knows? Let's say it's about ice cream for now. The flavor is very mellow, meaning it is not that strong. It's not overpowering. It's not, like triple chocolate ice cream where it's so sweet and so bitter and it tastes so strongly of chocolate. Maybe it's some kind of vanilla ice cream or some kind of rice ice cream instead, where the flavor is very, very minute. We're going to get to that word in a moment here. And also very gentle, very pleasant, very soft. And it has a spicy aroma that comes along with it. You can really zero in on a mellow sound or a harsh sound by combining the settings on the pickups and the tone knobs. And so maybe this person is some kind of music producer, right? And so zeroing in on a mellow sound, a pleasant, gentle sound, or a very harsh, abrasive sound. Harsh being the antonym here should show us what the word mellow means in this context, even if we didn't know what the word mellow meant in the very beginning. So with that being said, that is this adjective once more. It is specifically talking about sometimes sound, taste, or color, the pleasantness of that quality or that item that you're talking about, or the gentleness and the pleasantry that comes with age, wisdom, and growing up. It can go both ways. The next word is menagerie. This is a noun, a place where animals are kept for exhibition or a varied mixture. Okay, it's a variety of sorts. As you can tell by the spelling, this word comes from the French, okay, but we're going to pronounce it menagerie because that's the English pronunciation of it. And synonyms are agglomeration, jumble, hodgepodge, grab bag, scramble, motley, and smorgasbord. The reason why I put a lot of these fun little, synonyms here instead of the more academic ones, let's say, is because I think the word menagerie is the most academic we do get in terms of this. If we're talking about the animal part, we'll just say a zoo or some kind of conservatory. However, if we're talking about this variety that we're talking about, this varied mixture, then we might end up hearing it in a bunch of other different ways too. Oftentimes I would say we don't say the word menagerie that often, and so I'm trying to think of more practical ways for you guys to use this word and to use that definition of a varied mixture to your day-to-day life. And so that's why I have these here. Agglomeration is the most professional out of all of these, most academic. Then we have jumble, easy enough, it's like a mixed bag, you're just mixing stuff up. Then we have hodgepodge, grab bag, scramble, motley, and smorgasbord. All of these mean, some kind of big variety that's just all been mixed together. So if you ever hear one of these kinds of words, we might hear like we had to hodgepodge this thing together. That's a hodgepodge of craft materials. It's a grab bag of materials. It's a scramble of materials. That's a motley crew. You might hear that as a variety mix. And then smorgasbord as well. Wow, that's a smorgasbord laid out in front of me, and that just may be a variety of items. And so that's how we see these synonyms here. This is a magnificent palace with gardens, a menagerie, and a good library. So here, when we see the word menagerie, this is, again, a very rich person's word. We're not going to be seeing menageries left, right, and center all the time. But here, the word menagerie is being used to describe a place where animals are kept for exhibition. This might be some tortoises. This might be some chickens, horses, etc. Inside the lean-to was a menagerie of antique farm equipment. So here we're talking about a lean-to. Lean-to is some kind of shed or some kind of shack that usually has one larger, taller wall than the other. And then we call this a menagerie of antique farm equipment. Literally not a variety of animals, but we're a variety nonetheless. We can say that it is a menagerie, a mix, a cornucopia, and a smorgasbord, in fact. It seems that this creature escaped from an early private menagerie. So here, if it's a creature, we can say that this is some kind of animal exhibit. Included in this menagerie are fish, penguins, mollusks, sharks, and many others. And once more, we have more animals. I would say if we're talking about scale though, there's the zoo and then there's the menagerie. I would say that the menagerie is considerably smaller than a zoo. A menagerie will not carry more than maybe 10 animals at a time, and oftentimes you might have menageries within zoos. So, sectioned off with their own categories, and so that's how we can imagine what a menagerie is if we don't have one that we can easily access around us, right? Other than that though, a menagerie is still a variety of things, which makes quite a lot of sense if you're talking about a variety of animals, a variety mixed bag. A menagerie of antique farm equipment still works just fine to use in this kind of context. So with that being said, don't let the spelling scare you. I know it might be a bit hard to spell it in the first place, but if you want to say it's a mix of something and you need to use a noun, this is a good word to use for those kinds of contexts. The next word is methodical. This is an adjective, arranged, characterized by, or performed with method or order. So being very strict and to the code, to the letter. If somebody says, make sure you put toothpaste on your toothbrush, wet your toothbrush, and then brush your teeth, you don't just grab your toothbrush and then wet it and then put toothpaste on it, wet it again, and then brush your teeth. You're not being methodical. If someone says to do it exactly A, B, C, then you will do it A, B, C. Synonyms are orderly, planned, systematic, efficient, disciplined, meticulous, punctilious, and coherent. So once more, very straight to the point, very strict, following the rules as they're stated. We might say that the best words for this are disciplined, orderly, systematic, and maybe efficient. Meticulous is a really good one too. If you're talking specifically about like the particular aspects of an action or a movement, if you're talking about how accurate you are and how specific you're being, then you would say the word meticulous. There was something about the methodical way he set the table that was cute. So this person apparently did not do it just all at once, but rather, went around the table one fork at a time, one plate at a time, one napkin at a time. And they did it very specifically in a very particular order. Their movements were slow and methodical, controlled, deliberate. So if the movement is slow, methodical, controlled, and deliberate, we can think of this as maybe ballerinas or people who do ballet. You can't just move in the way that you want, as fast as you want. You have to do it slow, deliberately, trained. Every single movement has to hit a certain beat, and therefore it's quite methodical. There is a system to it. He was so calm and methodical during the whole business that it made it that much worse. And so he was calm, he was doing exactly everything he was supposed to when everybody else was stressing out, and that caused more stress because, maybe why aren't you stressing out like the rest of us? You're still doing things as exactly as they're supposed to be done and following the same kind of system. The complaint he gave was as methodical and merciless as he knew himself capable of. So maybe this person, isn't a really good person, they're quite methodical, but they want to complain to somebody. And so instead of just simply saying, hey, you should never have said that, he sits there and he looks up the, employee handbook. He sees which rules have been, broken, sends out emails, writes them in a very particular way, is very specific about the system that he's using to make sure that he gets what he needs. We might say that that is being quite methodical. Methodical is quite neutral, so it can go both positive or negative depending on the context of the sentence. So don't forget that just because, it's super specific doesn't mean it's very positive or very negative. However, we might see it, if we think that being super specific is a bad thing, we can use the word to mean it's a bad thing. And so it's really up to the person themselves how they use it that the context will change. The next word is metropolitan. This is an adjective of or constituting a large city and sometimes including its suburbs. A city, a really big city. We're talking like New York, we're talking Seoul, we're talking LA, Chicago, Atlanta, big cities, big cities. We will call these metropolitan areas. Synonyms are cosmopolitan, sophisticated, urban, cultivated, experienced, genteel, and cultured. There's a lot of connotations here that a city is where the culture is. It's where people are educated. Oftentimes this is because the cities are where people go to work. This is where innovation is happening. This is where inventions are happening. And so this is the reason why we will say these kinds of synonyms with the word metropolitan. However, at the end of the day, metropolitan really just means relating to the city itself. Related to the city, related to the districts within the city. That's how we will use it. That's how we will see it. And so I would say that all these, cultivated, experienced, genteel, cultured, I would say that these kinds of synonyms are not necessarily the ones we would be using most often. The city is a dynamic metropolitan area and major financial center. So relating to some kind of city. It is a city that is quite large. There's a metro, right? This is how we might also see the metro system, meaning the subway systems, the bus systems. There's also a lot of connotations with transportation there. So dynamic metropolitan area, dynamic city-like area. The entire metropolitan center possessed a high and mighty air, so the center of this area, the city-like area, had a very high and mighty air. Here we might say cosmopolitan, high-end, expensive, well-cultured, genteel. In metropolitan areas, the districts are responsible for education and social services. This is a really good example here. So we're saying that the districts within the city or within the metropolitan area, so the city areas, are controlled by the districts and they are responsible for education and social services. This might mean that in the suburbs or in the more rural areas where it's the farms, then the districts are not necessarily the ones who are responsible for these places. So we might see that kind of dichotomy there. Metropolitan residents are often used to living with a fast rhythm. City residents, okay? So if you ever have met somebody from a city that's really, really big, like let's think Manhattan, for instance, in New York, right? New York City. If you meet somebody who's lived there for quite a while and then implant them in, the middle of Ohio or the middle of Utah, for instance, the living style, the situation, the speed of life is quite different. And so one can say that metropolitan residents, like somebody who's lived in New York, are often more used to living with a fast rhythm. It's constantly go, 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 go to work, come back, go do things, go do that, versus, maybe people who take life a little bit slower. And so once more, this idea of a metropolitan area, metropolitan city, metropolitan center, all means related to the middle of a very big city. And when we're thinking metropolitan, we should also think really big city, like proper big city. The next word is mimic. This is a verb. To imitate closely, often to ridicule by imitation. So to mimic something is if somebody raises their right hand, you raise your right hand. If somebody raises their left arm, you do your left arm. And you keep doing this, in order to act like somebody else. Or, to perform like somebody else. And this can also go for things. But this is never really done in a positive way. This is almost always done in a negative way. It is often to ridicule by imitation, so you're making fun of somebody. Synonyms are parody, mock, spoof, caricature, burlesque, ape, copy, and imitate. So again, to copy someone, but to do it in a harmful way, to make them feel bad or to make a joke out of it, maybe make a joke out of the situation. Flameless candles mimic the flickering glow of a traditional candle, but without the flame. And so here it is a lesser than copy. That's another way to look at it too. Flameless candles can mimic regular candles. They can look like, they can feel like, if you put them in a jar, it looks exactly like a regular candle, but there's no heat. There's no, flame there. And so, you can leave it on and it'll just drain the battery and you forget. But if you actually light it, maybe it'll go off on its own. And so it is this imitation, oftentimes of a lesser quality than the original. These birds are not trained to do tricks, they simply mimic what comes naturally to them. If you guys have ever seen parrots or any kind of bird that can talk back to a person, these birds are not actually speaking, they don't actually know the English language. Rather, they mimic human voices. And so if you say hello to a bird, they don't actually know what that means. They say it back to you because that's what you said to them. And so they're mimicking you, they're copying you. And that's why it's so funny, is because sometimes they say it incorrectly and it's hilarious. Because I'm a weak hitter, I try to mimic Adam's forceful swing. So because I'm not that good, I want to reenact what somebody else will do. In this instance, it is Adam and his forceful swing. And so I'm going to try and imitate. I'm going to try and pretend like I'm him in order to get something good out of it. And this is probably the way that we will see this used most often, which is, I hate when people try to mimic my high-pitched and shrill voice. So here, mimic as a bad thing, having a negative context, oftentimes coming with some kind of ridicule. So once more, it's not just to copy something and to perform as something else or someone else, but also in order to make fun or poke fun or make light of who they are or their characteristics. For that reason, the word mimic, while it does work quite well in other contexts, oftentimes when we say the word mimic, it doesn't always have that positive context. We have to establish it, and it will almost always naturally, designate itself as a negative connotated word. Once more, because of this aspect of ridiculing. The next word is mingle. This is a verb, to bring or mix together with something else, usually without loss of identity. So here's the synonyms are blend, combine, fuse, integrate, merge, incorporate, and amalgamate. I would say that the word mingle isn't really like these synonyms. That's the closest we can get though. Mingling, at the end of the day, is to mix something together, to mix two or more parties, bring them together, bring them close, make them somewhat homogeneous. But the thing with the word mingle that these other words don't have is that it also has the added definition that when you are mingling, when you are coming together and combining, you are still able to have some sort of independence and identity that is still separate from the entire whole, okay? So, for instance, if we were to have some kind of like white sand and I took darker yellow sand from a different beach and I mixed them together in a bowl, I'm not simply mixing and mingling them, I am combining, blending, and fusing them. They are never going to come apart from each other unless I sit there and I manually, with tweezers, separate the sand again. But even then, who knows? I can still mix it up though. However, if I were to put oil and water together in a jar or a bottle, I am making them mingle. I can shake it as much as I want, but if I leave it to be, it will still separate and they will still maintain their identities as water and oil. So that's kind of how we can see it. Water and oil mixed together, they are mingling, they are cohabitating, but after some time they can separate and they'll still be their own things. These wild mammals of the ocean swim into the shallows to mingle with people. So here, if you're mingling with people, there's, sea turtles in Hawaii and sharks and stingrays, let's say. If you go swimming in the shallows, they will come to mingle with the humans, meaning they're going to mix around them, but at no point is the human and the stingray going to fuse and become like a human stingray, right? We're not going to mix so well that we are some kind of mutants of each other. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not blending so much that that happens. We are still able to maintain our own identities even within the water. Is this a sit-down party or a stand and mingle party? So here, if it's a sit-down party, everybody sits down. You might hear the word mingle be used in this context often, a mingling party, meaning you stand up, you go and talk to somebody, and you talk to another person, and somebody comes and talks to you, and then you guys go talk to somebody else. You are all maintaining your solo identities as people, but you are mixing together to talk with one another. Mingling is another way of explaining that, you're going out and you're talking to others. Spies decided to mingle in with the crowd to see if they could catch the thief. Just because they go into the crowd does not make them one of the crowd members, just there to watch some kind of video, maybe some party. They're not just there to party. They are also maintaining their status as spies to catch a thief. And royals never mingle with the common folk, but prefer to stick to their class. So this is another good one, right? So they don't go into the lower class and act like the lower class. The upper class just stay as themselves. They stay with their own identity as the royal class, and the lower class stay their own identity as well. And so that's the idea of mingling, coming together, becoming some kind of homogeneous group, but at the same time maintaining their own self-identity and awareness and independence from one another to keep them separate, okay? And so it's a bit more complicated. I would say the synonyms don't really match up one-to-one, but it is the closest we can get because mingle tends to stand on its own and does not mingle with the other synonyms very well. Then we have minute. This is an adjective, very small, of small importance, marked by close attention to details. So as we can see, it looks like the word minute. It's spelled the same way, but it's pronounced minute, okay? Minute, meaning incredibly small, incredibly tiny. Synonyms are minuscule, microscopic, Lilliputian, diminutive, micro, negligible, infinitesimal, or trifling. I personally think that out of all these words, the most fancy and the most high-level word you guys could probably ever use out of all of these is the word Lilliputian, okay? Lilliputian. The reason for that is because this word is actually a word that comes from Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, and one of these guys, the main guy in the story, he goes to an island and there's a lot of Lilliputians there. Lilliputians are really, really tiny people, and it's like a criticism on, humanity or whatever. But the point here is that this guy goes to this land and he's a giant, but he's like a normal sized human, and the land that he's in is so tiny, and there's people that are super tiny as well. And so when we say the word minute, we call it Lilliputian, we're saying it's so small, it's almost like the people from that storybook. The reason why it's so advanced is because nobody really reads Gulliver's Travels anymore, and it's a quite high level book to read and story to read as well. There was a minute difference between the real and fake artworks. And so maybe here we have a real and a fake, and there's like one detail or two details that are slightly different, that are slightly off from one another. And that minute difference, this incredibly small, infinitesimal is a really good word to use too, of very small importance, that difference is the thing that makes all the difference at the end of the day, because one will be sold, the other will be thrown away. Upon further inspection, the soil contained minute quantities of uranium. Not a lot, but incredibly small. So small that it's almost easily, forgettable, it's almost negligible, but it's still there. Even though we had worked hard, the chances of success were minute. So success, even though we worked hard, might not really happen. The chances of success are little to none. And she has the reputation of being a thorough attorney who can catch minute details. Once more, small details that no one else can find or see or catch. And so the word minute, another way to think of it is if you're thinking about a minute, right? A minute, one part of an hour, there's 60 parts in this hour. Minute can also just be like a minute. It is a very small part of a really long day. And so that's how we can also see this scale of size of being really small or being very infinitesimal, not very important in the grand scheme of something. And the last word is mobile or mobile, however you want to say it, both work just fine. This is an adjective capable of moving or being moved. Synonyms here are ambulant, ambulatory, moving, sprightly, energetic, motile, or spry. Now, I would say out of these synonyms, the ones that we want to be using the most often are probably ambulant and ambulatory, because first off, moving is too simple. Secondly, sprightly, energetic, motile, and spry, these words tend to have a lot of energy or activity, positive at that, connected to it. And that's not necessarily what we're trying to get at here with the word mobile or mobile. Instead, we want to just emphasize the fact that it is capable of moving or being moved, and the best way to really put that out here is the word ambulant or ambulatory, meaning moving, movable. Sentence-wise, bromine at ordinary temperatures is a mobile liquid of fine red color which appears almost black in thick layers. So, mobile liquid, it's not just some kind of gas that sits in the air, but when it's really condensed and at a certain temperature, it will swish around in a test tube. If you ever watch it, it's really cool. It moves around very slowly. Yet, we can still call it mobile liquid. It doesn't just sit there. It doesn't just look like it's a bunch of fumes. It moves around. It swishes. Every shade of feeling finds expression through her mobile features. So here, if we're talking about somebody who is very expressive, right? You can see happiness on their face, anger, sadness, betrayal, depression, all of those kinds of experiences and expressions, they are, very easily deducible from their face. So one can say that they have very mobile features, meaning their eyebrows can go up and down really easily. Maybe it moves from one expression to the next very quickly, whatever the case might be. Again, it is this aspect of being movable and moving constantly. There will be on-site mobile caterers offering hot food and drinks. And so here, this is how we're probably going to see it the most often. We have mobile caterers or some kind of mobile, event planner, some maybe I'd say company also maybe would be another example of this. We have a lot of industry mobile, bits and pieces around the world that we will see oftentimes, sometimes in trucks, sometimes in stops, sometimes in RVs, people that move around constantly to bring their business to you. For that reason, we have mobile caterers. So maybe this is some kind of restaurant, but in fact, they have a car that can bring the restaurant to you. We can call them a mobile caterer because they can go to you, they can move to you. Same thing here. When we came out with the examiner, he took us to a mobile health center. So this health center most likely is one that will not be there the next day. It moves around constantly. It goes where people need it to be. And so once more, it's not like a hospital where it's rooted down to the ground, but rather it is able to go from place to place. Just like the caterers, just like the features, just like bromine as a liquid, okay? So once more, even though we understand the word mobile and mobile as being able to move around, I did want to emphasize that just because we will be seeing more often in casual colloquial contexts as something that is mobile, right? So here talking about caterers, talking about health centers, some kind of business establishment, that's how we tend to see it most often. And sometimes we will also see it with the word mobility too. And that's the variant that we will see most often. And with that being said, those are our 10 words for this video, and I will see you guys in the next for another set of 10.